Small business and personal is really on the same realm that we want to look at. When we think about loans, we're talking about mortgage, student loans, cars, credit cards. All of those have in them a compound interest. Now, how do you kind of calculate compound interest? In essence, you have to have an amortization calculator. Now, I have one on my iPad. Now, I'm so glad for the day I get to delete that sucker because you can't calculate the interest. So if you had, and I'm just making up here for a second, if you had a $500 a month payment, and let's just say it's over a 6-year, kind of loan, 72 months, and I'm making up exact numbers, but you probably would have $400 bucks of interest and the rest of it on principal. It takes you, on a 6-year loan, let's say, you would be going out there about 3 to 3.5 years before you are in a positive ratio to be able to trade that car in. So they got you in the bondage point. And what if something very significant happened in your life? You're stuck, okay? That's why people just move easily into bankruptcy. Now, bankruptcy just happens, it's funny, happens about every 7 years in the same debt jubilee scenario that we have with the old kings. But you were always in bondage. You just stay in bondage and then you come out and come back into bondage again. You see, that's the whole bondage structure. And you think that bankruptcy is a release. It's not really a release. The compound interest is the sick portion of this. And when you realize that you're paying so much more over that time frame just for that stuff, that is the part that is illegal. How do we talk about that? There's several levels of this. Number one, in the first article, I think it's in the 10th section of that article, it says that you have to pay debt. You cannot pay debt with debt, meaning you had to pay debt with gold or silver. I want to give you just a hair of a story here. Let's see here. I want to just kind of address a little tiny story here. Let me verify this one here. Okay, let me just tell you a little tiny story that's related to this. So I was refinancing a loan with a hearing aid manufacturer, and I used to pay $19.50 a month. And then we reduced it down and borrowed some money out of it for a buyout kind of thing, and changed it all up as a new 5-year structure. And it actually was a simple interest loan. It's very different than the compound interest that I got. That's why it's not a bank kind of loan. And I love these people. And so they were asking me like, hey, Scott, what do you want to do, with the payments a month? And I was like, I don't know, what do you want? Like, you want me to write a check? You want to send an invoice check, on the first of the month, or you want it to a direct withdrawal? I was okay with them. And she was like, well, we have your credit card on file. I was like, she goes, well, we'll just do it for $1,850. And I was like, can you just do it for $1,900 and we'll pay off the debt earlier? And I had a structure that I had written in there that if I pay it off early, I'm completely released from the loan, because it actually had other things inside of that. So don't worry about it. She was like, we just do it with a credit card, because I always pay my cost of goods with credit card and they just wipe it out at the end of the month. I'm like, cool. My bookkeeper in Portland, I was having a hissy fit. Now in Portland, they're right on the border of Oregon to Washington State. It's called Vancouver. Portland, Vancouver, right beside each other. It's funny because people will live in Washington and they go and shop in Portland. They shop because there's no sales tax in Portland. There's no property tax in Washington. Okay, it's really telling you that's going to be some of the things that are going to change. We're going to wipe out some things that you will find fascinating in the world. Now, when I told her about this, she was like, you can't pay debt with debt because in Washington State, it's illegal to do that. And this was several years ago, way before I was really thinking about the NASARA kind of thing. And I didn't realize that it was part of the Constitution. And that's where she was pulling this information. But by the way, when you pay with a fiat currency, you're paying debt to debt. Illegal. Number two, The 14th Amendment under the 4th section, by the way, the 3rd section talks about election fraud. Okay? And that's Executive Order 13848 that Trump actually signed in December of, I think maybe it was January of 2018. But in December of 2017, he actually wrote an Executive Order 13818. And what that was talking about is relating to if you have crimes against humanity, you lose all of your property, which is a bankruptcy event, okay? So we talked about that in the last one. Now, but the reality, where he's getting that kind of authority is that in the 14th Amendment and the 4th section, it says that if there is an insurrection related to money, the people are not to be incurred or cannot be, they don't have to be payable of the debt of a national debt. So they're talking, and it's a really kind of strange statement. And this is done after the Civil War. You see, Lincoln got us onto the greenback currency, which meant the Congress was making through the Treasury, which is always the first event of the first part of the cabinet of every single cabinet is the Treasury Department. Now, what they did is they set up this amendment in the Constitution because they've known for generations that central bankers have always employed people from across the sea. The Rothschilds are from England. And frankly, who's also inside of the banking system is the king, or for us, the Queen of England. That is insurrection that has a portion that ties people in bondage to a system. That's why the 14th Amendment and the 4th section is so powerful to this. That's why compound interest is so bad. The reality, when you have problems like this in 2009, I started understanding that I had 90% debt to income ratio. If you remember from our last one, at 30 to 50%, you can actually have bankruptcy. Now, I didn't know what my ratio was. He didn't tell me. He just said, you need to declare bankruptcy. God protected me from really listening to him, but it stuck in the back of my mind. You see, when you get into that level, you can't pay for things. The world is sitting in these ugly ratios, personal ratios, and business ratios. And every time these big corporate ones, we'll talk about them, these big corporate suckers have big ratios, they just drop it onto the Fed, and the Fed drops it back into the system. Through inflation, that's how they take it from you, or if they take it from you by creating an extra part of the national debt. So this is, and they just make it come through the Congress, where Congress kind of says, well, yeah, maybe you need to take some more debt out. Okay, the Federal Reserve just grabs in and takes it from the people. So that's part of that sickness. And it crushes you because you don't have enough information. You haven't been spending time. You personally need to make a note of your life. You will educate yourself. Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Richard Kiyosaki is an amazing book series. But there are other ones that are like this. We need to invest in our lives. Rich Dad, Poor Dad will teach you quite a bit. The banks have been creating this system where you have to sign into it. All the banks have to do it. And this woman just wrote me on today. She said, well, the banks would never allow this. And the answer is, how do you take an authority away from someone? If you have a bully in front of you, what do you do with the bully? Would you let me take it away from you? No, you rip it away from him. I remember the very first time I ever took a bully, I didn't understand what I was doing. I'm 4th grade and he's been picking on me all time frame. Rory, I remember Rory very clearly. He was always the head, he was the quarterback and the pitcher and the point guard, right? And he was kind of a bully at this time frame, especially in 4th grade. And I'd known him since 1st grade, and I think he left around 11th grade or 10th grade, something like that. And Rory's just picking on me, and I was so mad about it. And there was this little area where there's this 2 little like prong, and everyone would clunk off their shoes. I lived in Colorado, so it was really muddy and can get dirty and everything. So people clunking off their shoes, and I'm crying, and I just hauled off, and I had a great blow, and I knocked him right over the end of this little metal pine here. And he walked in, and I just went in, I was in tears, not realizing what I had actually done. And Rory never said a word to me ever again. I took my authority back in that way. I mean, actually, we were more friendly after that time frame, because he was always like, remember that slug, okay? You have to be able to do that. And the way that you slug back at those kinds of things, at the banks, we're having to slug them all at once, okay? This is a major wartime operation that's going on. And when you do that, we're taking back that authority. Okay, so over on the right-hand side of the screen, you're seeing it on your left side of the screen here for me, but on that right side, we talk about the large corporate debt. So businesses actually grow based upon that. Now, you can do this from a small business level, which I personally have done before, and you can also do this on a large corporational role, okay? So let me just give you an example here of what a corporation might do. And so let me pull this up here. Sorry, I'm gonna just grab this out of here, bring up my little amortization calculator. So I just want to throw out an idea to you. Let's say you have a $600,000 borrow. This is a business that you're wanting to pay off, okay? And under compound interest here versus the $600,000 that you might borrow under simple kind of interest points. Okay, so what happens in that's roll, so we have $600,000, we're gonna just say it's at 5% over a 10-year period of time, which means that you would pay $672 in interest, $672, okay? Which is a total of $763,672 that you'd be paying back, okay? And your payment would be $63.64 a month. Now, people will take this, companies will take this kind of thing and say, well, we need to make at least $7,000 to cover the debt. Now, once they pay off the loan, they can be able to take that, and that's all for profit, okay? But if you're not paying off that loan, you're in a negative position. Does that make sense? Now, let's just say if we, and this is the type of system that they do. But if we just said we have a 5% over a 10-year period of time, the amount of that simple interest might be $30,000 or $630,000 that you might pay, and that would be basically $52.50 a month. Now, when you see the difference between those kinds of ideas, you realize, wait, that's a ton of money. That's $100,000 more, and that's just giving them the interest. But looking at the amount, that's basically $1,100 a month. You're like, why should they get that much? Why should a bank be able to not just charge a simple interest? I propose to you that I think what will happen is some type of fee basis. And how do you know that? Because they actually set it up already. The PPP loans were a fee. And I told you about this in the first one, if you haven't gone and watched this. There was a fee that the banks got, and I got my money. And who was getting this all from? From the Small Business Association right down to the Fed. The Fed was giving the money. Small Business Association is part of the Treasury Department. Treasury doesn't have any money. The Fed does, okay? So Trump actually kind of hijacked the system. So I believe that we're going to walk into a different kind of level of system. Here's the thing that you have to catch, and we sort of intimated this before. When big banks and big companies are too big to fail, one of the things that they do is they put the debt upon the Fed.